Hello and welcome to this machine learning enabled Django app project. So we're going to build a Django app to predict the iris flower species from a user input. So first of all, we're going to build and train a model to classify different species of iris flowers. So we're going to be utilizing Jupyter Labs. And then we're going to build the app to take input from the user using a simple form, and then it's going to return the predictions. So this is going to be a simple form and utilizing Ajax to return the information back. So the final product, we're going to be building this right here. So what we have here is a simple homepage where we can type in the different values or properties of a particular iris that we found in the garden maybe, and then we press submit, and then what gets returned is what we typed in and then the classification. So the likelihood is that this data here would represent an iris virginica. There we go. So we can also then view the database. This is all the entries that we've included or someone's tried, or this is all the predictions that have been made so far in this system. So you can see here that we're going to connect that data to a simple database and we can view it and then make a prediction again. So that's the project that we're going to build. If you take a look at the repository for this project, you'll see that there is a Jupyter Labs book that we're just about to utilize, the data file, the CSV data file, and also the pre-made pickle model, which we can utilize directly with Django if you didn't want to go through the machine learning tasks. So I'm assuming you've got some way of using this or generating this code. I'm using Jupyter Notebooks. So first of all, we load the libraries. You can see here we're going to need pandas and the scikit-learn library. We'll be utilizing SVC algorithm here. So the first thing you need to change is this path here. So you need to download the iris.csv file from the repository, and then just make sure that this path is connected to wherever you save this data. So the next thing we do is we then select our features, and then we create training and testing variables. We split the data, so we're using 80% of the data here for training, and then 20% of it for testing. So the next task is to fit or train the model. So we got this data that we split up from the iris.csv, and we're going to use 80% of that to actually build a model. We're utilizing the SVC algorithm. So we're going to do that. And then once that's done, we've got the model, and then we can make a prediction. And you can see here that I printed out a prediction to test to see the accuracy of our model. So to build the accuracy, we're going to take that 20% of our data, and then we're going to run it through the model, and that's then going to help us produce the accuracy. So once we've got this model, we can now use it to input more data to try and make a prediction about more flowers. So in order for us to utilize this new model in Django, we're going to need to pickle it. So we do that. So just make sure that you've changed the path here, because we're going to need this file here in Django. So in Django, what we're going to do is unpickle it. So basically, we're just compressing it and decompressing it, and then we can utilize it in Django. But this example here, we can take some inputs. So this is essentially what we're going to do again in Django. We're going to take some inputs from a form, and then we can predict a result. Okay, so if we run this code, we can then enter these inputs here. One. So these are the inputs right here. Two. So I'm typing in some data, and you can see here now makes a prediction. So if we found a flower, an iris flower, and it had these measurements, the likelihood it's going to be an iris virginica. So if you're following the code, I did forget to include the accuracy score, so I've added that in, and then this will work. So this model that we created, so if we were going to visualize this model that we created, loosely speaking, in this scatter plot here, in the iris CSV file that's included in this repository, project repository, if we were to create a model out of that, we would potentially see this here if we were to visualize it. And you can see that there are three separate areas here. And these three separate areas represent the three different iris varieties that's in the data set. So essentially what we're doing is if we enter some more data in and check it against our model, and the new data we entered happened to be just here, then the likelihood our new data represents or is going to be categorized as this iris variety. And again, if we added some more data into our model and the data represented a dot here, then it's obviously close to this type of iris and so on. So that's roughly, loosely speaking, how we can type in more data and then generate a classification of an iris variety. So let's now head over to Django and now put all this code into some sort of functional app so that we can output some predictions. Okay, so we're using PyCharm. I'm going to create a new project. It's going to be a Django project. I'm going to call this iris. As per normal, we're going to be utilizing the virtual environment. So I press create desktop iris machine learning iris folder. So we create this. So this is our new project. Right, so let's create a new app. So we're going to start a new app. We're going to call this predict. So we've got a new predict app, and then obviously we need to go into the iris folder, go to the settings, and then just create the app. Predict. Okay. So now I'm just going to set up the URL. So how this project is going to set up, there's just going to be a home page. That's going to serve the form, and there'll be another page, the database page, to show all the database entries. So I'm just going to head over to the URLs here, and we're going to just then add include, and then add a new entry path. It's going to be blank, and we want to then include the URLs from the new app. So predict.urls, and then give it a name space. We're going to call it predict. There we go. So now we're going to link that to a new file here. So we're just going to create the new file, urls.py, and then we'll go ahead and just copy this over. We get rid of that and the admin. Okay. And now we can get rid of that. So we're going to create a new path. So we're going to create a view, a new view in a second. We're going to call that predict. And then we're going to use a name equals predict, which could get a bit tricky. Right. So with that in place, we can take away one of those, add an S there. And now what we need to do is give this a app name. So this app name will match the namespace. So predict. There we go. So now we set up the URLs so that we can make the predict page. So let's just make sure that we import the views. Okay, and yeah, that's that completed. So let's head over to the views and build our first view. Okay, so we're just going to build a simple view here. I'm going to want 2 spaces. So you can see here that it's going to be called predict, and then it's just going to take in the request. There's nothing really here apart from requesting this file here called predict.html. So we now need to go to the templates. Let's create a new file called predict.html, and we'll just put hello right there. And now we can just test to see if this is working. So with the server on, we just go and check this out. And you can see that we've got hello. So everything is working exactly how we want at the moment. We've got the basic homepage, and now we need to build the form. So we're going to build a few templates here. We're going to build a file called base.html. We're going to have other files extend from that. So we need the base, and then we're going to need an index. And then while we're here, let's just build the last page, which is going to be the database file to output all the entries in the database. Okay, so that should be all the templates that we're going to need. So I won't bore you watching me write out 100 lines of code. So what I've got here is the base file, base.html, which all files are going to extend from. You can see that I've got the basic HTML here. I'm going to be utilizing jQuery 3.4.1. So this is just the Bootstrap CSS. So if you go to Bootstrap and then just copy and paste the template, the starter template, started that way, and I've just added the 3.4.1 jQuery. So I've got a title iris prediction. So down here again, I've copied and pasted a nav bar from Bootstrap. And what I've got are 2 entries, prediction, which is going to link to the home. And I've got a database here, which is going to link to the results view. Okay, so that's that in place. So that's a simple nav bar down to there. And then I've got my block here. So this is where it's going to be replaced by the information in index and db.html. And then down here is just the JavaScript left over from the Bootstrap template. So that's the base file completed. It's just a simple Bootstrap copy and paste from the example starter template. I copy and pasted the nav, and then just make sure we're using jQuery 3.4.1. Okay, so I've just tidied up the templates. I got rid of index. I don't know why I needed that. I've got predict and results. So I've deleted the db.html, and I've just changed that to results.html. So this is the predict HTML file. You can see it extends the base. So it just means that all our code from predict is going to be included right there in a second. And we've then put this code in the mock block main to indicate that we want to put the code here. And so we just start off with a simple Bootstrap container. I've put some padding at the top there, and I've now got a new row. And I'm utilizing this justify content MD center because this is going to include the form, and the form is going to be nicely centered in the middle of the page. So the next task is to then create a column MD4. So that's going to define the size of the form. And then I've got a heading, iris prediction, and then the form. So this is a form that you can see has a number of inputs. So we've got an input for the length and the width, and then the length and the width again. And the only special things to look at here, I'm using required from HTML5. So someone has to actually type something into it, otherwise the form won't submit. And I'm using a number type. So I'm forcing people to use a number in the input. And I'm defining the fact that we can utilize a float in the form. The rest is just a class, and I'm giving it an ID so I can then capture that data later. So this is the form from start to end. And that's a short explanation of what's going on there. So once we finish that, we then start with some JavaScript. So we're going to be using Ajax to send the information here to the view. So what we're first saying is we've got a submit button right here. So when we submit, that submit is going to be captured by JavaScript here, and it's then going to perform this function. So basically, we're going to create a post, and we're going to send it to URL predict submit predictions. So what does that mean? So this is basically telling or saying where the data is going to be sent. So this is a reference here to the app. So if I go into my URL, so we've got predict, that's the app name. And then the second reference point here is the reference point to the view or the new URL that we're going to need to put in to the URLs. So let's do that next. So to connect that up, we're going to create a new URL. So we're in the predict app and we're in the URLs. So what I need to do now is create a new URL or path, sorry. So this is going to be predict slash, and then we've got views.predict changes. So that's the view that we're going to build. And the name is submit prediction. Okay. So that will nicely now link the this Ajax here, so it knows to where to send the information. So this is going to be inquiring here. It's going to know then, oh, okay, I need to now utilize the view.predict changes. So now let's go build the predict changes view. Before we do that, let's just finish off here. So we submit the form. We then we know where to send the information. We're going to be utilizing post, and the data that we're going to be sending is this here. So how this is matching up here, we're setting these variables here that we're going to send across, and you can see that ID petal width, for example, we're gathering the value from that ID, which is in the form. So if I go up here, petal width, here we've got the ID petal width. So this is that piece of code is referring to this input here. So when someone types something into this form input, we're going to capture that information right here. And this is what we're going to send across. So all this information here, if you remember, is all the values that we're going to need to send across to make a prediction. So let's start to build our predict changes view here. So you can see that I've gone ahead and I've started building this. So first of all, there's an if statement here. So we just check to make sure that the request is a HTML, a post request. So we just check for that first. And if it is a post request, then we're going to collect the data from the post information. So here we're collecting the length, width. So this is just matching up. So we're taking the information that's been posted. Now, if you remember, going back to our predict, that we created these variables here, and then we put that into the post message. So what we're doing now is we're just referencing these variables again, and we're just extracting that out and putting it into some more variables here. So now we got the information that the person has typed in. Okay, so now we need to go back to our machine learning roots, because what we're going to need now is to unpickle the model that we created earlier. So we need to just make sure that we've got the right path to that model. And then once we have that, we put that into a variable. So we collect the data into a variable, and then we can make a new prediction. So here, basically what we're doing is that we've now got the model, and we can now predict some more make some more predictions. And we use these variables here, which match these variables here. So someone's typed in something into the form. That information has been sent across here. We then capture that information into new variables, and then we use those variables, that data, to make a new prediction on the model that we created earlier. So once you've done that, you can see that I've put that into a new variable called classification. Now I've gone ahead, this piece of code. So now I've taken the information in. I've then made a new prediction and then saved it in this new variable. I can now send it back. So here, what I want to do is to send information back. I'm going to send back the information about the classification. And then I'm also going to send information back about the data that someone's typed into the form to begin with, and then just display that in the modal. So that's what's being sent back now to the page, to the predict page. Okay, so back in the predict.html, I now need my modal. So this is going to display the information that's being returned. You can see here that I have just copied and pasted this again from Bootstrap, and I've just made some changes here in this body. So I've got a title, I've got the length, the width, and width again. I've got this span here, and I've given it an ID of SL, SW, PL, PW. And also this ID here is called prediction underneath here. So this is where the data is going to be injected through JavaScript. So going back into the JavaScript at the bottom here, you can see that this is what gets returned here. So if we do get a success, everything is working. What we've got here is information that's going to be sent back. So first of all, I reset the form. So the data that was inside of the form that someone's typed in originally, it just gets reset. So I use the name of the form right here. So that just gets reset. So data disappears. And then what we've got here is we can put the prediction data SL, SW, PL, PW. We inject the data that's been sent back by the view. So these are the reference points. So result, blah, 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 blah. So those are that's the information that was sent back. And what happens then is the modal opens up, and then that information gets injected into the span areas here. So it's just linking that up to the bottom there. So I guess what we should now do is just check to see if this works. So I've gone ahead and started the server. And I've typed some things in. It looks just like that. Press submit. And at the moment, the modal appears, but there's nothing inside. So just like any project, you need to make sure that all the libraries, all the dependencies are installed. So the error here is that name PD is not defined. So the likelihood is that now what we need to do is add the library Panda. And if you remember, we're also going to need scikit-learn library. We need to import that into our project. So I can just use the terminal here. I just close the server, pip install, and then the first thing we need is pandas. So that gets installed. And then next up, we need to install the scikit-learn. So to finish that error that we received, the PD, we actually now need to import pandas into our project. So that's in the view file. So I import pandas. And then also, because we're using the JSON response, I also need to import that too to get it working. So these are the libraries, dependencies that are needed in the views. So let's head over back to our app. Just make sure your server's on. So what we should now have is a working app. Put some data in and then press submit. Our modal appears, and you can see that this is the data we typed in that's being captured back there. And then we've got our prediction. Okay, so let's just try something else. So we can get a different result. Now, in fact, we can check to see if it's working because if we look in our data, the iris data, this data here should correspond to the iris setosa. So let's just type this in 5.4, 3.7, 1.5, 0.2. There we go. And then press submit. And there we go. So we can see that the model is working. So let's now work out how to save this information into a database and then view the information on the app. So I've gone ahead and I've created my model. You can see that I'm going to need these 5 inputs. I'm going to store these 5 pieces of information here. So the length width is going to be float. And then I've created a char field here, the max length 30 for the classification data. And you can see here that I'm returning self-classification. So in the database, we're going to see the name of the classification. So the next thing is we'll just add this to the admin.py. So in the admin.py, you can see that we've imported the new model. And then I'm just registering this table so it's viewable on the admin site. So let's go ahead and just close the server. And we would just, first of all, update our database. So we're make migrations. And then we'll migrate to update our database. So now the database is updated. We're going to create a new super user. So let's go ahead and just check our admin area. So now we've got a new table. What we need to do now is get the data into the table. So we need to head back over to our view. And so if we think about what's happening here, someone's typing in information into the form. It's then invoking this, this view. It's been tested to make sure it is from a HTML post request. And then you can see we're capturing this information. So all we need to do is take this information that's being captured and, well, put it into a database. But obviously, we're also going to need the classification in the database. So if you remember, we're going to take the width, the length and the width, and then the classification. So in our view, we're going to import the database from models. Import is called pred results. So we just make sure that we can access our new model. And then at the bottom here, we then basically just need to insert the information. So like I was saying, this is the information that's been collected from the user. This is the classification text that gets predicted from the information that the user types in. So all we need to do is add that information in, and then it will then be inserted into the database. So it's a little bit untidy. So we've got length, width, and then the classification. So here, there's 2 methods here of inserting. So this is just a quick method here, objects.create. So what should now happen now is that when a user makes a prediction, it should now be inserted into the database. So let's give it a go. Just make sure the server's turned on. Yep. So if we go back into, let's open up a new window. So if we go back into here, make a prediction. Okay, so Virginia, go again. So what we should have now, if we go and refresh this database, and there we go, we've got our new entry in the database. So that's all working. So the last task is to connect that up now to the HTML page. So I've headed over to my templates results. I've then extended, first of all, from the base. So that gives me the HTML, the nav bar and the footer information. And then in the block, I'm now going to have a new container, padding again, of 5, bootstrap padding 5, and then a new row. So this is all bootstrap. We've got the header, and then I've created a table for the content. And you can see here that this is the column headings. And then what I've got here is a for loop. So what's going to happen here is that for every entry in the database, this is going to loop through. And you can see here what I'm collecting is the ID field, and then the length, the width, and then the classification data again. So now what we need to do is go back to the view, and then we need to make a new view for this. So basically here, we're just going to create this simple new view, which is going to take, get all the information from the pred results table. And then basically we're just going to return that to results. Okay. So, excuse me, it's just a simple case of collect all the information. So I've got SQL query, if you like, and then we put it into this variable here called data, and then we return this data to the page, and then we can loop through that data. So the last thing we need to do is now make a URL. So we just need to remember the name of the view, view results, go into our URLs, make sure that we're using the URLs to predict, and then create a simple URL. So it's going to be results. So view results. So in our view results, we're sending it to results.html. Yep. Okay. And you can see that this is going to be the path. So if I want to see the results, if I go back to my base HTML, notice here that I put the link here to /results. That's going to obviously now match that URL. So I can access the results directly if I want to. Otherwise, if I go to the predict, if I then go to the modal, down here, for example, there is a link here, view DB. So there's close button and a view DB button, and that's also sending to /results. So now if I go back here, I can access the results by typing in /results if I wanted to, or obviously clicking on this link that takes me to the results. That's what we first typed in. And of course, now if we make a new prediction, press submit, and then view the database information. There we go. We've got the new entry and the database information. Okay, so that kind of concludes this small project. All the code is available for you in the repository. If you've got any questions, as per normal, just leave them in the comments.